Hey guys, Martin here. Bald head this time. A lot less crying this time as well. Last week wasn't the most auspicious moment of my life. It wasn't the most dignified moment of my life, and I'm laughing, to cope with it. And I hate that I put a downer on a lot of people. I put a huge downer on a lot of people because for those of you who didn't see last week's, and I wouldn't recommend it, it's just me being miserable. What happened was I was talking about the fact that it was the Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged 10-year anniversary, and I said, and I meant it at the time, and I still kind of feel the same way a little bit, was that I didn't want people. A lot of people thought that I said I didn't want you to celebrate the 10th anniversary, and that's not true. I don't think that I said those exact words. I don't really want to go back and watch the video and check, but what I meant with a lot of what I said was that I don't feel like celebrating myself, and I feel I would. All I wanted to say was that I didn't want to see like lots of messages saying, congratulations on the 10-year anniversary and all that. I didn't want to be bombarded with that because it would just make me feel guilty, and it would make me feel like I'd let a lot of people down because 10 years later and I didn't have anything to show for it at this particular time. So I didn't want to see that. I didn't want to be part of it, but I didn't want to discourage people from celebrating. I didn't want to discourage anybody from having a good time ever, like in any situation, within reason, obviously. But I don't want ever want you to think that I'm telling you that if I feel miserable that you have to feel the same way. Like in general, I don't want you to feel like you should feel bad because I feel bad about something. And I don't want you to feel like I don't want you to feel the same irrational negativity that I feel from time to time. And I felt very irrationally negative last week, and I apologize for that. I I'll be honest, the day of the 10th anniversary, the way I tried to get through it was just not to think about it, which is part of the reason why I asked people not to send me messages saying, happy 10th anniversary. I still appreciate that you thought of me and that you wanted to send positive vibes. I obviously understand the intent and the message, but I just didn't feel like I could deal with it on that day. I didn't really deal very well with it on the day, but I did my best to put it out of my head. And it's not, again, a lot of people misconstrued it as, that I'm ashamed of Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged or that I don't want to do it anymore. The truth is, I just feel like I've let a lot of people down with the amount of work and the quality of work that I've put out the last 5 or 6 years, maybe even longer. It just, seeing it, 10 years on, and being where I am, and being in the position that I am, and being in the emotional state that I am, I feel like I've failed a little bit. And that's what I meant by a lot of what I was saying. I didn't want people to get the impression that I was like, well, this was a huge mistake, because it wasn't. It has been a very positive thing for me my entire life, since it came into my life. And I hope that it's been that for you. And I don't want you to think that I regret it, or that I don't want you to enjoy it, and that I don't want you to have a good time. I just wanted that day to not be a thing, I wanted to pretend that it wasn't a thing. And that's not the way you deal with problems, but that's how I dealt with that one, and that wasn't a healthy way of doing it. But yeah, I want to talk about depression. I want to talk about something specific related to depression, which is bloody motivation. I'm laughing a lot. I don't know if you can tell. I'm trying to make up for the really, really sad video I released last week, which probably put a lot of people in a bad place, and put me in a bad place after I'd finished it, honestly. It was difficult to get through, and it was difficult to recover from it. So I'm laughing, and I'm trying to smile more, and that's not me trying to make light of what's happening. It's not me trying to make light of what you're going through. It's me trying to just put the negative thoughts to one side and replace them with something, at least outwardly more positive. But what I want to talk about this week is motivation. And I've seen a lot of people, obviously not necessarily affected by depression. A lot of people this last week or two have been doing more active stuff. They've been going out of their way to go outside and participate in public events and going up for walks and getting more exercise and one of the reasons they're doing that is Pokemon Go came out very recently, and that's obviously really cool. A lot of people are just getting up in the morning and going to conquer a local gym at like 5 or 6 in the morning, or they're going for a walk to hatch their eggs, and that's awesome. I think that's really cool. I look at people doing that and I'm like, wow, I wish I had the motivation to do that, because I downloaded the game. Is it a game? The app, and I played around with it while we were going to hang out with people at like the movies or a party or something, and then I was like, you know what, I'm probably not going to touch this again, and I'm probably not going to go out and try and catch Pokemon because I don't want to go out. So I deleted it like the other day. And I'm not saying that to be like, well, I was defeated by depression. It wasn't about depression. It was about motivation. And I feel like I don't have the same level of motivation as a lot of people. Just naturally, I don't feel like I have that. I feel like if there's something that requires an uphill struggle, I will be very likely to be sat at the bottom of the hill waiting for somebody else to do it. And that's just me. I'm lazy. Look at me. You can probably tell. Look at my content that's been released and how sporadically it's released, and you can probably tell that I'm a bit of a lazy person. I'm a passive person. I'm a lazy person. But depression, the way depression has affected my motivation is I feel like before I was aware of the fact that I was depressed, before I necessarily, had that going on in my brain or in my, wherever it's affecting me, before that, I was relatively good at keeping motivated. I got stuff done on time. I would get stuff done. If you give me a schedule, a work schedule, and you tell me, here's the cutoff date for when this needs to get done, I can get things done like right before that cutoff date. I can pretty much pace myself. I can force myself to make an effort and get that stuff done. I feel like post depression, or I don't know, mid depression, whatever. I don't know what the right phrase is. Since dealing with my depression, my motivation has made it so I will look, if you give me a schedule, I will look at the cutoff date and I'll say, well, that's optional, right? Well, that's not something I actually have to aim towards. That's just an imaginary line that somebody put there. So I can just sit back and be like, okay, whatever. If I fail, I fail. I'll probably fail, Yeah, and the thing about the way depression affects my motivation is that it slows it down. It slows it down and it makes it a lot less effective. It makes it so it practically doesn't exist at times. I told a friend of mine the other day, I feel all these ideas like shooting up into my brain, from my gut to my brain, and there'll be an idea just going all the way up there, and then it'll sort of fizzle out right before it gets there. Like it feels like, sometimes there's like an invisible hand just sort of like snuffing out the flame of the idea, or like imagine like it's a firework that goes off and then just nothing. There's a dud or something. That's what it feels like sometimes. It feels like depression snuffs out the fire of motivation. And I feel like the reason I deal with that more often than not lately is because I have a lot of my ideas for like a video, for example, and the video will be comprised of writing, editing, voicing, etc. And then I'll look at that and be like, that is too big. That is too big. I can't handle it. I can't handle something this big. This is not for me. I need to leave. I need to leave this behind and go away and do something else. And then I'll sit down and do something much more menial that I can handle. Or I'll just switch off, and be like, this is too much. I need to go just sit down with my thoughts and not do anything. Or switch my brain off, And, I feel like I'm sure a lot of people deal with worse things with depression, but depression will kill motivation dead. And unfortunately, motivation is the life force by which we get things done and by which we express ourselves creatively, because heaven knows there's enough out there to stifle your creativity as is. But when you're doing it yourself as a result of this condition that you're going through, it's internally frustrating. It's really unfortunate, and it's killed so much of my forward momentum, and it's probably responsible for the fact that, a lot of video ideas that I've just been sitting on just haven't presented themselves, and they haven't been stuff that I've sat down and wanted to write, or even begin to think about. A lot of it is laziness, I'm sure, but I do feel like depression is responsible for when like, for example, if someone's like, do you want to do this? And I'm like, yes, I would like to do this. And then depression says, by the way, no, I don't. No, you don't. You really don't want to do that. And then I'm like, you're right, depression. You know better than I do. I feel like it gets in the way. It presents more obstacles. It shows you the field. It shows you the racetrack ahead of you that you have to get from point A to point B. And it just is like, by the way, I'm just going to throw all these imaginary obstacles on the field for you as well, so that this seems like a much more monumental task than it is. So depression, what I'm saying is, it makes things difficult, if not makes it impossible sometimes to get motivated and to be inspired. It destroys creativity from time to time. That's my experience. I'm sure you've felt similar things. I mean, everybody's experienced writer's block at some point, but it feels almost sometimes like there is a permanent writer's block, like field, like a dampening field around me at all times. Having said that, there are ways to deal with this. There are ways to obviously counteract it or just get around it. And the way I deal with it is I take one task at a time. I try and it's simple, it's basic advice, it's stuff that I'm sure everybody's told you since you were born. But strip down these big jobs into smaller, easier to digest tasks and approach it one thing at a time. Like, what I often say to myself is, if I can get this one thing done within this hour period that I've got coming up, I succeeded. And nobody can tell me I didn't. Not even this, So I will sometimes just be like, if I can just sit down with the camera and talk to it for a good 20 minutes this hour, then that's my job done. And then the next hour we'll deal with when we get to it. But we haven't got to it yet. So it makes it easier for me to pretend that hour isn't necessarily going to happen. Sometimes it's easier for me to just pretend it's not going to happen. But the most important thing is that I just do this first thing, and that is the first step is the hardest. As they say, the first step towards healing is the most difficult. The first step of anything is the most difficult, because once you're walking, you realize how much easier it was than when you thought, So if I can get that first task, that wake up in the morning sometimes is my first task of the day. And if I get that done, I'm already on the way to success. I'm already there. I'm already halfway there. And being halfway there is better than not being anywhere. But yeah, this is obviously very simple advice, but it's difficult to keep in mind, and it's important to remember. So if you're struggling with motivation, what I say is take the very first part of what you want to do. The very first part. If you're wanting to write a book, write the first sentence. The very first part. Doesn't even have to be a whole page. Write the first sentence down, and you succeeded at something. If you want to go for a walk, well, just take a walk down the street, and that's all you need to do necessarily. If you don't want to go further, you don't have to, but you started. And who knows where your mind will be once you've started. But yeah, first step is the most important, and the important thing is deciding to make that first step. And that can be difficult with depression, because it really wants to discourage you. It really wants you to fail. It really wants that. But you don't want that deep down, obviously. Why would you want that? Why would you want to fail? Why would we want that? We don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want you to fail. I don't want you to fail. I hope that a lot of you don't want me to fail, but the one thing that is wanting us to fail is depression. So if we give up, that's who wins. And unfortunately for me, last week, that's who won. But he doesn't win every time, He doesn't win the battle. I mean, he does win the battle, but he doesn't win the war. We win the war by sticking to our guns and getting through this and facing things and not pretending that they didn't happen and not pretending that they won't happen. We have to face them. And we can stay motivated. We just probably can't stay as motivated as we would be otherwise. But I'm going to try. I'm going to try really hard to be more motivated. I'm going to try. Because last week was difficult, but it was because I let myself fall into that situation. But you pick yourself up. And that's what people remember. You know? All right, well, I got to go and get to work. Motivation. Good to see you guys. Hope you guys have a good week.